If you have a pre-hung hollow core door, you need to trim the height. I'm going to show you how I do these. If you have a 6-panel hollow core door, you're going to have to probably trim off the top and the bottom. But this one, just a slab, I got to take about 5 inches off of this thing. Not ideal, but you got to do what you got to do. So I'm going to end up taking the jamb apart and cutting that down. The hinges and everything can stay where they're at. What happens on these pre-hung doors is if you cut the whole thing off the bottom, if it's more than an inch or so, you're going to end up with the handle's going to be uncomfortably low, and it's going to feel weird every time you go in and out that door. So what I do is I take it all off the top. I'm going to mark my rough opening here, minus a little bit for, room to shim and whatnot. So, and mark the top where the head jam's going to go back in there. That piece we're going to reuse and put it down lower where it needs to be. And then I left about an 1/8 inch gap reveal for the door. And then I marked where I'm actually going to cut the door. It's better to mark this stuff first. Excuse me. And then you don't have to guess when you got this thing apart. This has like a mortise and tenon type thing. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to cut it off flush with the sides. And after you get your door all marked up, then you can take it apart. This way you know what you're cutting and where you're cutting and all that stuff. So get the hinge pins out, and then the packing clip that goes through the handle hole there that kind of holds the thing together while you're moving it around. Pull that out, set it aside, hang on to it so you can put it back in when you're done. And then I got to the jamb, and I tapped the jamb apart, and of course it's particle board junk, and it's, kind of ripped apart, but that's okay. We're cutting quite a bit off the two sides, and then the top head jamb there. We'll have to clean that up because we're not cutting as much off of those. Like I said, just watch out for screws and nails. If there's anything in there, try to get it out of the way. You're going to trash your blade. So you can see I got my left and right side marked, and then the headpiece, I'll show you what we're going to do with that. We're just going to cut a little bit off because the door stop's actually the right size of the door. So we'll get those staples and crud out of there, out of the way. The two sides, like I said, I got them in there. And we'll cut those off, and then we need to trim the door stop on the left and right side just a little bit. If your door stop is mitered in the corners, in the top corners, you might have a little rougher time. This is just kind of square butted, so I'll show you the basic idea here. Piece of scrap just to mark where my jam's going. It's good to have reference marks here. I need to trim just the door stop down a little bit so that the headpiece will fit right in there. I won't have to, wrestle with it. So get that marked, and then we'll cut that little square off each side, pop that out. It's okay if I'm going to use my chop box here. It's okay if you overcut just a fuzz, especially with this one. It's getting painted, so it's not a major deal if you overcut it a little bit, but you could use a handsaw or a little jam saw for that if you wanted to. Pop that little piece out. And then this is the head jamb. So I cleaned the wood out of there just basically so you could see what I'm doing. The door stop is actually the right size of the opening that I need. So I'm just going to run my saw right up next to that door stop molding, but those staples got to come out. These close nipper tool here works great for these because it's got that roundy head. You can grab it nice and tight to the wood and rock it back and forth and get those kind of things out of there, or you can snip them off if they're really hard. But having that head that rocks back and forth makes it a heck of a lot easier. So you could use pliers or whatever for that, I guess. And then I'm just cutting it flush with the doorstop molding itself, because like I said, that's the right size for the opening. So I'm going to trim both sides of that and then put the jamb back together, and I can start working on the door. As I said, it's nice to have everything pre-marked and ready to go. So once you take this thing apart, you know what's going on as far as where you're cutting and whatnot. So I clamp this thing together. I'm using some 2-inch drywall screws to put this thing back together. It's a good idea to pre-drill no matter what kind of wood you have, but especially if it's particle board. You could put glue on this joint as well, but I'm going to put 3 screws in here. It's going to be more than enough to hold this thing, probably better than it was actually. So I'm going to pre-drill, and then I'm also going to countersink the heads just a little bit for the head of the drywall screw, so it's not sticking out, and that last little bit when you go screwing that in, if it's not countersunk, there's a chance you could split it. So yeah, just countersink for the couple seconds it takes to do that. It's probably worth it. It really doesn't take that long. So get that screwed back together, set aside. I ran a piece of tape across my where I'm going to cut this thing. I got this handy snap straight edge there. Those things are really nice, quick and easy. And then score where you're cutting it on the top side. You don't have to worry so much about the bottom because your saw blade's cutting up into the wood. The top's where you need to watch out for chipping. So we'll score that. Then I moved the straight edge over a little bit to accommodate the bottom plate of my saw and clamp that down. Double check it, make sure you're not over the line. And then take your time when you're cutting this. Don't, jam your saw through here as quick as you can because you're in a hurry. Just take your time, nice and slow. Hopefully a sharp saw blade. Sharp saw blades equal happiness as far as I'm concerned. Dull blades are just a great way to ruin something. So yeah, just take your time cutting that off nice and slow. And after you get that off, you get the tape, your clamp and everything out of the way. You can see the bottom piece of this door. You can reuse the bottom piece of this door if you don't have any wood or anything handy. You could run this through the table saw and cut it to length there. Trim this. You can either trim the sides off or just cut it to the proper width and stick it back in the door. If you don't have anything else, that's kind of a pain doing that. If you got a chunk of wood laying around, 2x4 or a piece of 1x, I got this little piece of pine or poplar or whatever, 1x, and we're just going to rip it to fit and cut it to length. So you could do this with a circular saw. Table saw, obviously a lot easier. Like I said, just take your time and whatnot. So you can get the bottom of this thing put back together relatively easily. This wood, 3/4, not much thinner than what was in there as far as the width goes. Sorry about the light there. The sun decided to come out unexpectedly. So inside these doors, there's just basically cardboard that holds this thing rigid in the middle. And there's wood around the edges. So I just took a sharp chisel. You could probably do this with a knife or screwdriver or anything. It's not really typically hard to get these things loose, but you need to pop that out of the way a little bit and make room for the piece of wood that's going in there. Make sure there's not any big boogers or anything, glue boogers or anything like that. So maybe hit it with a piece of sandpaper real quick. Get the boogers off of there before you put your piece in there. I just kind of test fit this a little bit. It's nice and snug, which I like. Not too snug, but yeah, it's going to work out real nice. So it's all going to work. So get ready and just glue this thing in here. Basically, just some Type Bond 2 glue, some good wood glue for this. Don't spare the glue. Just gob it on there. And then after you squish your piece in there, you can, wipe it clean or whatever. But you have enough glue to get the top side. So I'll just glue the piece, the other side of this piece. Like I said, just super gob the glue on there. Spare no expense, as it were. And then you can tap this thing in there. When you get this thing, just start on one end and go easy with it. If it's a tight fit like this, if it's a hair loose, don't worry about it. It's not rocket science. So tap this thing in here real easy. You don't want to hit it too far, or it's going to be countersunk a little bit. I guess you could use a screw to pull it back out, but just tap it real gentle like. Get the glue wiped off. I like it nice and flush. Some guys will put it, countersunk a little bit, but flush is perfectly fine. And then after you get that in there, I'm going to clamp it, use a couple pieces of wood on either side, and put a couple clamps on here. 3, 4, you can use 10 if you need to, whatever. And just clamp this thing for an hour or so, and let that glue set up. Like I said, you take a wet rag and get the residual glue off of there. It wasn't a whole lot. I'm just kind of showing you with my hand there. And then set that aside to set up. And then you can go about putting it back together after that sets up. So you can see that top hinge is kind of high, but either way, if you cut it from the bottom or the top, the hinge is going to be weird. I guess you could move it, but and then you got your nice little reveal gap there for when you put it back in. So yeah, I would say if you have to do a project like this, my recommendation is to cut it off of the top for sure. And like I said, save that little nub, that little packing pin there. You can put that back in so you can pick this door up and move it around, and your door handle will be nice and comfortable where it needs to be. So hope that helps.